So how did DesignerCon start? The show started very small. We started really with local vendors. We dealt with the guys that I kind of knew just in the LA area. We had my friends like Japan LA and Monkey King and Alpha Cult. These were all just local guys. And we all just loved the toy scene. So me, primarily, I was a collector. And I had my little toy store, 3D Retro, which was online only. And basically, there really wasn't anything for the community in terms of this type of community that DesignerCon is. Collectibles, art figures, all that stuff. Street, urban art, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, I don't have a retail store. I don't see our customers. I don't meet the fans. We really should have like a little get together. So in 2005, I was like, I'm going to do this because there's nobody else doing it. And we started in a 1,000 square foot room at the Pasadena Convention Center. It was great. We had like, handful of vendors, maybe had like 100 people come by throughout the day. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is great. And mind you, DesignerCon started as Vinyl Toy Network. It was VTN. The reason for that is because we were mainly doing vinyl toys, vinyl figures. That was the major platform, the major product for the collectible figures back then. They were vinyl figures coming out of places like Hong Kong and Japan and Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, things like that. This is all brand new stuff. So that's why we were the Vinyl Toy Network. Really, as the show grew, all these local companies were just like, hey, I know David Horvath. I'll ask him to come to the show. I know Joe Ledbetter. I can ask him to come to the show. Like, I made a toy with Toma. I'll ask him to come to the show. We kind of grew that way. But every time the show grew, every time we were able to go into a bigger area and bring in more companies, they brought in things from their end. They brought in their apparel. They brought in their artists. They brought in their art. So we were evolving in that way. It was great. Year after year, the show grew. We went from a 1,000 square foot room to like a 1,500 square foot room to a 3,000 square foot room to an 8,000 square foot room. Around 3 years into it, I noticed that it was getting harder to grow the show. And mind you, the show's been growing organically year after year. But it was harder to grow the show because it was harder to get new vendors in because of the name Vinyl Toy Network. And it's like, we don't deal with vinyl toys. Yeah, but you make the art related to the vinyl toys, or you make the apparel related to the vinyl toys. These companies were just not big in the name. So in 2009, we grew up. Our mascot, Vinny, grew up. He became Vincent. And the name grew up, and we became DesignerCon. And the first year, it was Vinyl Toy Network presents DesignerCon. And we slowly introduced this new name to our community, and it took off. It actually did what it was supposed to do. It presented ourselves as we're not just about vinyl toys anymore. We're about all the aspects of the design world that, correlate to what we've been doing already. So there's apparel, and there's two-dimensional art, and there's 3D printing, and there's digital collectibles, and there's resin pieces, and there's custom pieces, and there's plush art figures, and there's everything and anything that falls into our world mixed in with a dash of pop culture. And it's weird. It's not your Comic-Cons of the world, but it's not your art shows of the world. It's somewhere in the middle. And we grew. DesignerCon grew. We kind of went from 5,000, once again, from a 5,000 square foot room to like a 10,000 square foot room to a 20,000 square foot hall. And then, it got to a point that in 2017, we took up everything that the Pasadena Convention Center was able to offer us. We were in the exhibit halls. We were in the ballroom. We were in Hall C. We were at basically 90,000 square feet. We were in the lobby. It was gangbusters. Literally the line was around the block. We almost got shut down by the fire marshal. And that's when we were like, we got to do something about this, because we went from, hey, go to DCon and have a great time and, get it in 5 minutes and do all your holiday shopping, to stand in line for 45 minutes just to get in. It's like, whoa, that was bad. As we grew into bigger halls, and definitely when we changed the name, we got into more markets. We were able to bring in more artists. There was still initially the show was 1 day. And then we grew into a weekend show. And then we grew into a show that was like Friday night and the weekend show, which was what we are right now. But as we, expanded our timelines, expanded our halls, we were able to get bigger names, bigger artists, bigger companies. We started getting vendors coming in from overseas. Like the name DesignerCon was like, we would go to places like Japan and they're like, yeah, we've heard of DesignerCon. Or we would go to Hong Kong and we would set up relationships with these guys and tell them like, hey, we have a show. It's called DesignerCon. We would love for you to be there. We would go to other trade shows where they would be in different parts of the country, other countries, and the show would evolve. We knew we had to expand upon it. We also saw that some of these other shows that these companies were doing, they weren't really getting the love and the attention, or they weren't getting the audience that they wanted, which is from a collector's perspective, we knew that these companies would do really well at DesignerCon, which is kind of like why we always say we curate the show. We have, we know what vendors would probably do really well and what vendors would not. 2018, we decided we got to go somewhere else, and we decided that we're going to go to Anaheim. That's one of the largest convention centers in the West Coast. One of the biggest things that happened to us was in 2018, our first year in Anaheim, the first time we have like actual one big hall. And now we're able to bring in companies like Metacom, like, Tokidoki, like Funko, like Mondo, clothing companies like Extra Large, The Hundreds, Mishka. We set up a name for ourselves, and now we were in a location, and we still are in a location where the size is able to let us bring in these larger vendors. So one of the major things to remember about DesignerCon is that, yes, the show has grown more than just toys, but also at the same time, the toys were never just about the toys. The toys were about the artists. And that was our goal always, to emphasize the art, emphasize the artist behind the figure, emphasize the art behind the figure. And so when we started growing into apparel companies, when we started growing into galleries, when we started growing into plush figures, all of these things had the aspect of the artist. And our emphasis has always been like, hey, even though you may be a large company that's coming in, we really don't want the, cartoony, non-art related stuff. We really want your artist collaborations. We want your art figures. We want the t-shirts that represent art design. Even the companies that were doing t-shirts and things like that were like, can you bring the artist that designed that and have them sign? So that's the kind of like the specialty in DesignerCon. There's always the emphasis of the creator, the emphasis of the artist. There's somebody designing this, and we want to highlight that. And it has to make sense when it comes into the show. I think we've done a really good job in making sure and curating that, where most of the time we get the artist directly. We always say we don't have artist tables, we don't have artist booths, because every vendor inside of DesignerCon has an artist associated to it. So all the artists are our vendors, and it's probably the only show out there where some of the biggest artists out there, you can just come up to their booth and talk to them and, shoot the shit. Yeah, we've been very lucky in getting some of the biggest artists to be on the show floor of DesignerCon. Even from early on, like one of the first shows, we had David Horvath, creator of Ugly Dolls. We've had great artists like Gary Baseman, Tim Biscup, Tara McPherson, Uck G, Sket One. The list goes on. And then we've had the privilege of having international artists come. Junko Mizuno, Passing Long, Toma, Punk Drunkers. There's so many there. We've had the London Police join us. We've had Faffy join us. We've had some of the biggest guys out there, not to mention these pinnacle artists like Ron English, who was globally known, especially in the Asian market. Tristan Eaton. We've had guys like Stephen Harrington, who are also globally known. We've been very lucky and, grateful for all these artists taking their time to come collaborate with our show, create for the show, and honestly meet with the fans and talk to the fans and sell to the fans directly, all at DesignerCon. We talked a lot about how the show over the past 20 years has grown with the brands. We talked a lot about how the show works with the artist, depends on the artist. All of this has been really important in the 20 years of DesignerCon. I think one of the most important things that we really need to talk about is the fans, the collectors, the community. Without these people, without people like me, the reason why I started this show 20 years ago, the show is nothing. And I really want the fans, the community, the collectors, all of you guys that are watching this to understand that DesignerCon is really nothing without you. And it's important to understand that. And the reason is because the reason why it's important to understand that is because without you, there would be no show. We can't do the show without you. We can get a bunch of companies in a room, we can get a bunch of artists in a room, but if the fans don't show up and if the community doesn't support an entity like DesignerCon, we fail. We can't grow. We can't continue to bring you what we've been doing for the past 20 years. We as a show, we have, I guess why our history is so important is to understand that we have grown organically over the years. We don't have investment teams. We are not owned by these larger companies that run dozens of shows throughout the year. We've all done it with the support of the fans and the community and the collectors. So that's why you guys are so important to us. Without you, there really would be no show. So thank you for the past 20 years. Thank you for making this possible. And we hope that all of you guys come to Las Vegas, have a good time with us, celebrate 20 years of community, because that's what we really are celebrating. We're celebrating 20 years of art. We're celebrating 20 years of fandom. But more importantly, we're celebrating 20 years of community. And we hope that the community comes out to celebrate with us as well. We're really looking forward to seeing you guys all there. November 14th, 15th, and 16th, the Expo World Market Center in fabulous Las Vegas. We'll see you guys there.